Over 60, top 5 food mistakes that are secretly aging your eyes. Now listen carefully, because what I'm about to say might shock you. Did you know that 99% of people over 60 are making food choices every single day that could be aging their eyes at lightning speed? And the worst part, most of them have no idea it's happening until their vision starts to fade. We've been told for years that blurry vision, cataracts, and trouble seeing at night are just part of getting older. But that's not the full truth. The real culprit is often hiding in plain sight, right there on your plate, in the foods you trust, the snacks you crave, and sometimes even in what you thought was healthy. Now some folks will roll their eyes and say, "Doc, come on, food can't possibly make that big a difference." Others will swear nutrition is everything. The reality, both sides are partly right. Aging is natural. Yes, but the speed of your eye aging, how soon you struggle with dim light, how quickly cataracts creep in, that's where food becomes the game changer. And here's the kicker. The top mistake I'll reveal today is one nearly every senior I've ever treated has been guilty of. It's the hidden habit that may be quietly robbing you of your independence, and yet it's the easiest one to fix. So stick with me, because in this video we're breaking down the 5 food mistakes that are secretly accelerating the aging of your eyes. And I promise you, by the end, you'll see your meals in a completely different light. But before we dive in, do me a quick favor. Hit that like button, share this video with someone you care about, and subscribe to the channel. Every click fuels us to bring you more life-saving, eye-opening health advice that you simply won't hear anywhere else. All right, let's get started. What you're about to learn could change the way you eat, the way you see, and the way you age. Why eyes age faster after 60. The human eye is one of the most delicate organs in the body. Unlike skin that can heal or muscles that can rebuild with exercise, the eye has limited ability to repair itself once damage occurs. It depends on fragile blood vessels, specialized nerve cells, and light-sensitive tissues that are all vulnerable to time and lifestyle. That's why so many people over 60 suddenly find themselves struggling with blurry text, glare from headlights, or difficulty driving at night. The truth is, these problems aren't just old age. They're the result of 3 major changes that happen to the eyes after 60, and the food you eat can either speed them up or slow them down. The first change is oxidative stress. Think of it as rust forming inside your eyes. Free radicals, unstable molecules your body produces through normal metabolism, poor diet, or too much sun exposure, attack the proteins and cells that keep your eyes clear. Over time, this rust clouds the lens, leading to cataracts, and it damages the macula, the part of the retina responsible for sharp central vision, which can trigger macular degeneration. Studies show people with higher oxidative stress markers are nearly twice as likely to develop advanced AMD, and oxidative stress is a well-documented driver of cataracts as well. If you've ever noticed your vision feeling strained after a long day in the sun or during times of stress, that's oxidative stress at work. The second change is slowed circulation. The eyes are incredibly hungry organs. Per gram of tissue, the retina consumes more oxygen than almost any other part of the body. That means it relies heavily on a rich supply of blood. But with age, and especially with a poor diet, the tiny blood vessels that feed the eyes become stiff and narrow. When circulation weakens, the retina simply doesn't get enough oxygen or nutrients. Vision fades not because the eye stops working, but because it's being starved. Research from the National Eye Institute has shown that people with cardiovascular disease are at least 50% more likely to develop macular degeneration. And Johns Hopkins found that seniors with poor circulation lose vision at significantly higher rates. It's like tending a garden. Without enough water, the plants don't die overnight, but they wither slowly, and the same thing happens to your eyes when blood flow is compromised. The third change is reduced nutrient absorption. Even if you eat a balanced diet, your body becomes less efficient at pulling key nutrients from food after 60. Lower stomach acid makes it harder to absorb vitamin B12, zinc, and other minerals essential for eye health. Add to that the fact that many older adults take acid-reducing medications, and you've got hidden deficiencies that quietly accelerate eye damage. Research published in JAMA Ophthalmology found that seniors with low antioxidant and zinc levels were more than twice as likely to suffer severe vision loss. I once treated a 74-year-old woman who ate plenty of vegetables yet showed rapid decline in vision. Blood tests revealed low zinc and B12, not because she wasn't eating them, but because her body wasn't absorbing them. Once we addressed that with targeted supplements, her vision stabilized. Put all 3 changes together, oxidative stress, reduced circulation, and poor nutrient absorption, and it becomes clear why eyes age so quickly after 60. The CDC estimates that over 11 million Americans in this age group live with macular degeneration, while cataracts affect more than 24 million adults over 40. Even more striking, researchers believe that up to one-third of this vision loss could be delayed or prevented with better diet and lifestyle choices. So the real question is, if your eyes are this vulnerable, what are you doing each day to protect them? The food on your plate, the walk you take after dinner, the colorful salad you choose instead of a processed snack. These small choices can determine whether you're still enjoying a favorite book at 85 or struggling to recognize the faces of the people you love. And that's why understanding the 5 biggest food mistakes is so important, because once you know them, you can start protecting your vision today. Food mistake number 5, too much processed sugar. Let's start with the sweetest mistake, sugar. Most people know it's bad for their waistline or heart, but very few realize it's also one of the biggest enemies of healthy vision. Every time you eat cookies, pastries, soda, or sweetened cereal, your blood sugar spikes. Those extra glucose molecules attach to proteins in your eye and form compounds called advanced glycation end products, or AGE. I tell my patients to think of AGEs like caramel hardening inside the eye. Over time, that sticky buildup clouds the lens, leading to cataracts, and it weakens the tiny blood vessels in the retina, increasing the risk of macular degeneration. It's like pouring syrup into the gears of a watch. Eventually, the gears stick and the whole system slows down. The science is clear. Research in investigative ophthalmology and visual science found that people with high-sugar diets had nearly double the risk of developing advanced macular degeneration. Another study from Tufts University showed that seniors eating high-glycemic foods such as white bread and sweets faced much higher risks of cataracts compared to those who ate low-glycemic diets. And it doesn't take diabetes to cause this damage. Even normal blood sugar, when spiking too often, can stress the eyes. I think of Elaine, a 67-year-old retired teacher who came to me worried about her vision. She wasn't overweight and she wasn't diabetic, but she loved her sweet tea in the afternoon and cookies at night. When we scanned her retina, we saw early damage. Together we cut back on sugar, replaced the cookies with blueberries and walnuts, and encouraged more leafy greens at dinner. Within a year, her vision had stabilized, and she told me she could read comfortably at night again. Another patient, Robert, age 70, had the habit of drinking 2 cans of soda every day while fishing. By the time he saw me, he was developing early cataracts. Once he gave up the soda and switched to water and unsweetened tea, his energy returned and his cataracts stopped progressing as quickly. The truth is sugar hides everywhere, even in foods people believe are healthy, flavored yogurts, granola bars, packaged juices. The average American now consumes about 17 teaspoons of added sugar a day, nearly 3 times the recommended limit. Ask yourself, how often do you stop and think about how much sugar you're actually eating? How many of your favorite, healthy snacks are quietly sabotaging your eyesight? The good news is that small changes can make a big difference. Replacing sweets with antioxidant-rich fruits like berries, kiwi, and oranges not only satisfies your craving, but also delivers vitamin C and other nutrients that strengthen blood vessels in the eye. Pair that with nuts or seeds, and you're giving your eyes vitamin E and healthy fats too. You don't have to give up dessert forever, but sugar should be the exception, not the everyday rule. So the next time you reach for something sweet, pause and ask yourself, am I feeding my eyes or slowly clouding them? That small moment of awareness might be the key to keeping your vision clear for years to come. Food mistake number 4, excess processed meats and fats. Bacon, sausages, deli ham, hot dogs, these foods are part of American culture, the comfort meals many of us grew up with. But after 60, they stop being comfort and start being sabotage, especially for your eyes. Processed meats are packed with nitrates, nitrites, sodium, and oxidized fats. These compounds damage blood vessels, raise blood pressure, and add to oxidative stress. The problem is that your eyes depend on some of the tiniest and most delicate blood vessels in your body. When those vessels weaken, the retina doesn't get the oxygen and nutrients it needs, and vision begins to fade. A study in BMC medicine that followed over 18,000 seniors for 10 years found that those who ate processed meat more than twice a week had a 22% higher risk of developing vision-related problems. Other research has shown that diets heavy in processed and fried foods accelerate macular degeneration, while diets rich in fish, beans, and vegetables are protective. I remember a patient, Mr. Harris, a 72-year-old retired machinist who loved his daily ham sandwich. He wasn't overweight, he still kept active, but he came to me saying that even reading the newspaper was becoming exhausting. Looking at his diet, it was clear processed meats at nearly every meal. We worked together to replace the ham with grilled salmon, beans, and more vegetables. Within a few months, he told me he had more energy, and his ophthalmologist noted that the progression of his macular degeneration had slowed. Another patient, Mary, 69, relied on sausage and deli turkey because they were convenient. She complained of constant eye dryness and fatigue. Once she cut back on processed meat and added more fish, olive oil, and vegetables, not only did her energy improve, but her eyes felt less irritated, a clear sign that inflammation was calming down. The damage isn't limited to macular degeneration. The sodium in processed meats raises blood pressure, which in turn harms the blood vessels in the retina, a condition known as hypertensive retinopathy. According to the American Heart Association, more than 2/3 of adults over 60 have high blood pressure, so for many seniors, processed meats are adding fuel to a fire that's already burning. That's why I often ask my patients, is the convenience of a cold-cut sandwich really worth the strain it places on your eyesight? The good news is there are better options. Fish like salmon, sardines, and trout are packed with omega-3s that keep blood vessels flexible and reduce inflammation. If you don't like fish, beans, lentils, or tofu provide clean protein without the additives. Even lean chicken prepared at home is far safer than packaged deli slices. Making these changes doesn't mean losing flavor. It means trading short-term convenience for long-term vision. A ham sandwich can become a Mediterranean wrap with hummus, grilled vegetables, and chickpeas. Bacon at breakfast can be swapped for avocado toast with seeds on top. These choices don't just protect your eyes, they strengthen your heart, brain, and overall health. Processed meats don't make you go blind overnight, but day after day, meal after meal, they quietly chip away at the health of your blood vessels and accelerate vision decline. By cutting back and shifting toward healthier proteins, you give your eyes the circulation, nutrients, and protection they need to stay strong and clear for years to come. Food mistake number 3, skipping omega-3s. This mistake often surprises people. For years, many seniors were told that cutting out fat was the healthy choice. Unfortunately, that advice often meant eliminating not just unhealthy fats, but also the essential ones that your eyes absolutely need. The retina is packed with DHA, a special kind of omega-3 fatty acid that supports nerve function, helps repair tissue, and keeps vision sharp. When your diet lacks DHA, the retina weakens, inflammation rises, and your eyes lose their natural ability to recover from daily stress. The result is a higher risk of dry eye syndrome, difficulty adjusting to low light, and a much greater chance of developing age-related macular degeneration. The research is compelling. A Harvard study showed that women who ate fish twice a week had a 42% lower risk of AMD compared to those who rarely ate it. Other studies published in JAMA Ophthalmology and the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition confirm the same pattern. People who get enough omega-3s not only have healthier retinas, but also suffer less from severe dry eye, a condition that affects millions of Americans over 50. I've experienced this myself. In my early 60s, I noticed a gritty, tired feeling in my eyes every evening, as if there was sand under my eyelids. At the time, I had been following a low-fat diet, avoiding fish and oils because I thought I was protecting my heart. When I started adding sardines a couple of times a week and using flaxseed oil in my salads, the discomfort faded quickly. My eyes felt clearer, more hydrated, and the strain was gone. One of my patients, John, a 68-year-old accountant, had a similar story. He ate very little fat, mostly rice, vegetables, and chicken, but no fish, nuts, or seeds. He came to me complaining that walking into dim restaurants or driving at dusk felt impossible. We added salmon once a week, walnuts as a snack, and chia seeds in his breakfast. Within 3 months, he reported that his night vision had improved dramatically, and his eye exam showed no further progression of his early macular degeneration. So let me ask you this. When was the last time you actually included fish, nuts, or seeds in your meals? Are you avoiding fat out of habit without realizing you're cutting out the very nutrients that keep your eyes healthy? The truth is that the right fats aren't the enemy, they are medicine. The better choice is simple. Try to eat salmon, sardines, or mackerel at least 2 to 3 times a week. If fish isn't your preference, plant-based options like chia seeds, flax seeds, and walnuts are excellent alternatives. Even something as small as a drizzle of flaxseed oil over your vegetables can provide the omega-3s your eyes need. Skipping omega-3s is one of the most common mistakes I see, but it's also one of the easiest to fix. Small changes add up, and when you start feeding your eyes the healthy fats they rely on, you'll notice the difference not just in your comfort, but in your clarity and confidence when you face the world. Food mistake number 2, overeating refined carbs. White bread, pasta, and rice may seem harmless, but inside your body they behave just like sugar. These refined carbs break down quickly, spike your blood glucose, and create compounds called advanced glycation end products, or AGE. Over time, those AGEs clog the delicate gears of your eyes, clouding the lens and straining the retina. The result is faster cataract development and a higher risk of macular degeneration. A Tufts University study found that seniors with high glycemic diets had a 49% greater risk of advanced AMD than those who ate more whole grains. Other research published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition confirmed that frequent spikes in blood sugar increase lens opacity, an early sign of cataracts. I think of Mr. Leonard, a 74-year-old who ate white rice at nearly every meal. He didn't eat much sugar and wasn't diabetic, yet his eye scans showed early cataracts forming more quickly than expected. We gradually replaced his white rice with quinoa, barley, and brown rice. Within 18 months, his cataract progression had slowed noticeably, and he told me he could read longer in the evenings without strain. Another patient, Margaret, loved her pasta dinners. She ate generous portions several times a week, but soon began struggling with fatigue and trouble adjusting her eyes when moving from bright rooms into darker spaces. By cutting her portions, switching to lentil pasta, and adding more vegetables, her energy improved and her night vision became more reliable within a matter of months. So let me ask you this. How many times a day are refined carbs slipping into your meals without you thinking about it? Is it the toast in the morning, the sandwich bread at lunch, or the pasta at dinner? Each of those choices might feel small, but the damage builds quietly over the years. The better option is slow digesting whole grains that release energy gradually. Quinoa, oats, barley, and brown rice keep blood sugar steady, sparing your eyes from the constant roller coaster of spikes and crashes. These grains also add fiber, vitamins, and minerals that support your heart and metabolism. Choosing them more often doesn't mean giving up bread or pasta forever. It means making refined carbs the exception instead of the daily standard. Overeating refined carbs is one of those habits that feels comfortable in the moment, but carries a hidden cost to your vision. Replacing them with whole grains is a simple change. And once you make it, you'll notice the benefits not only in your eyesight, but in your energy, focus, and long-term health. Food mistake number 1, ignoring antioxidant-rich foods. This is the biggest mistake, and it's also the most common one I see among seniors. Most people over 60 simply don't eat enough colorful antioxidant-rich foods. Leafy greens like spinach and kale, bright fruits like blueberries, oranges, and kiwi, and nutrient-dense nuts and seeds are the natural defense system your eyes depend on to fight oxidative stress. Without them, the tissues of your eyes are left vulnerable to the slow, rust-like damage that accelerates vision loss. The science is very clear. The landmark ARD study by the National Eye Institute showed that a specific mix of antioxidants, vitamin C, vitamin E, zinc, copper, lutein, and zeaxanthin, reduced the risk of advanced macular degeneration by up to 25%. That's a huge number when you consider how common AMD is among older adults. Yet surveys show that more than 80% of people over 60 don't get enough of these nutrients every day. That gap is one of the main reasons so many seniors assume poor vision is inevitable, when in fact much of it can be delayed or prevented with the right diet. I think of Dorothy, a 70-year-old retired nurse who came to me discouraged because her eyesight was fading fast. Her diet consisted mostly of bread, cheese, and coffee, with very little variety or color. We made some simple changes, spinach in her breakfast, kale in her salads, and a handful of almonds as a daily snack. A year later, she came back smiling and proudly told me, "Doctor, I can thread a needle again." That moment showed her just how much difference food could make. Another patient, Frank, 75, had relied on packaged snacks and sandwiches for years. He developed early AMD and was constantly complaining about eye fatigue. Once he started eating more blueberries, carrots, bell peppers, and nuts, his energy improved and his vision scans stabilized. So let me ask you, when you sit down to a meal, do you see a rainbow of colors on your plate, or is it mostly beige and brown? Each color in fruits and vegetables represents a different antioxidant that your eyes need: greens from leafy vegetables, orange from carrots and sweet potatoes, red from berries and tomatoes, purple from grapes and plums, yellow from peppers and corn. If those colors are missing, your eyes are missing their armor. The better choice is to make a rainbow a daily habit. Oatmeal with blueberries and walnuts for breakfast, a kale and spinach salad with orange slices for lunch, almonds or sunflower seeds for a snack, and roasted carrots or broccoli with dinner are simple, affordable ways to keep your eyes nourished. These foods don't just protect your vision, they also support your heart, brain, and overall health. Ignoring antioxidant-rich foods is like leaving your front door unlocked every night. Maybe nothing happens right away, but over time the risk grows until the damage is done. By filling your plate with colorful produce and nutrient-rich foods every day, you give your eyes the best chance to stay clear and strong well into your later years. So let's sum it up. The 5 food mistakes that are secretly aging your eyes are clear. Too much sugar, too many processed meats, not enough omega-3s, overeating refined carbs, and ignoring the colorful antioxidant-rich foods that act as your eye's best defense. On their own, these habits may seem small, but together they can slowly and quietly rob you of sharp vision and independence. Aging is something none of us can avoid, but the speed at which your eyes age is very much in your control. Every smart choice you make at the table is a choice for better vision, stronger health, and more years of living life on your own terms. So let me leave you with one question. At your next meal, will you choose foods that drain your eyesight or foods that protect it? The decision is in your hands, and your eyes will thank you for it. Thank you so much for watching. If this video gave you something valuable, please like, share, and subscribe. It helps us create more eye-opening health content just like this. Stay well, take care of your vision, and I'll see you in the next video.